Welcome back, political enthusiasts. Today, we're diving into a fiery Senate hearing where Senator Ted Cruz grilled Attorney General Merrick Garland over a controversial DOJ memo. Cruz was on fire, accusing Garland of targeting parents who were merely expressing concerns at school board meetings.
The difference between law and politics. We heard some impassioned political speeches, but also a question that just was asked by my friend from New Jersey. Is there anything in this memo to tell a parent that they're being targeted for harassment and intimidation? I would note that the letter from the school boards cited 20 instances, 15 of which were nonviolent. The letter from the school board described them as domestic terrorism. Within days, the Department of Justice snapped to the commands of the special interest and issued a memo, a directive to the Department of Justice and a directive to the FBI. This is again where law matters. The opening sentence describes a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence. Now, you spent a long time as a judge when you have three things listed. Am I correct that anyone interpreting that, reading it, would conclude that harassment and intimidation are something different than threats of violence, given that you listed each of the three out separately? Is that consistent with the canons of construction?
He claimed that the memo, which addressed harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence, unfairly painted these parents as domestic terrorists. Cruz pointed out that most incidents cited were non-violent, arguing that listing these terms separately suggested they were distinct, and demanded Garland clarify their legal definitions. Garland, however, defended the memo, stating it was aimed at addressing real threats and ensuring public safety. He stressed that it was directed at DOJ prosecutors and law enforcement, not parents. But Cruz wasn't buying it. He accused Garland of caving to special interests and criticized the involvement of the FBI in what he called local disputes.
The memorandum is addressed to professional prosecutors.
I asked you a question, not who it was addressed to.
Senator, at least let him respond.
No, not when he answers a non sequitur. If
He
he wants
may
to answer
respond
okay, you're taking my time now. This is not coming out of my time.
Listen,
when I ask a question,
we've given
he
you
can
more
answer
time than any other senator.
Mr. Chairman,
Now listen,
when I
all
ask
I'm
a
asking
question,
is allow him to respond.
Mr. Chairman, when I ask a question, he can answer the question, but he's proceeding to ask a total non sequitur. I asked about the canons of construction on the board.
Please let him respond.
I'll ask the question again. The opening line of the memo specifies harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence. Is it correct under the ordinary canons of construction that a legal reader would understand that harassment and intimidation means something different from threats of violence? Is that correct?
A legal reader would know Virginia versus Black, the Supreme Court definition of intimidation, and a legal reader would know 18 U.S.C. 2261A, the definition of harassment.
And would a parent?
This was not addressed to parents.
But you know, parents read it. You're the Attorney General of the United States. You said you can't think of anything harassing. You directed the G-Man, the FBI, to go after parents. All right, let's move on to a different topic.
Things got even more intense when Cruz shifted gears, accusing the DOJ of political bias. He grilled Garland about whether the DOJ was investigating Dr. Anthony Fauci for allegedly lying to Congress. Garland, adhering to standard policy, refused to comment on ongoing investigations. The hearing then reached a boiling point over President Biden's remarks on firing unvaccinated police officers. Cruz pressed Garland for a clear stance, arguing that such actions could worsen crime rates in cities like Chicago. Garland avoided a direct answer, emphasizing the high number of law enforcement deaths due to COVID-19 and leaving vaccination policies to local authorities. Despite Cruz's relentless demands for a straightforward answer, Garland stood his ground, reiterating that these were local decisions, not within the DOJ's purview.
We've sadly seen that you are willing to use the enforcement power of the Department of Justice to target those who have political views different than you, even if it's a mom at a PTA meeting. Let's try the other side. Are you willing to enforce the law fairly against people who are political allies of the president? At a Senate hearing in May, Dr. Fauci said, quote, "The NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology." That was under oath, under testimony. On October 20th, the NIH principal deputy director, in writing, directly contradicted it. Those two statements cannot be true. As you know, Section 1001 of Title 18 makes it a federal crime to knowingly make false statements to Congress? Is the Department of Justice investigating Dr. Fauci for lying to Congress? And will you appoint a special prosecutor to do so?
I'm going to say again, the memorandum that I issued is not partisan in any way. It has nothing to do with what I agree with or I don't agree with. I don't care whether the threats of violence come from the left or the right.
Could you answer
Now,
the
with
question I
respect to
asked?
The second question, we don't comment on criminal investigations or other investigations. If,
Well, amazingly, when it's the political enemies of the administration, you comment loudly in a memo. Let me ask one other question.
You're not asking- you weren't-
President Biden recently said in a national town hall that police officers who decline to get vaccinated should be fired. Do you agree with President Biden on that?
I think all police officers, look, I stood on the stage at the mall where the 700 and some police officers who died this year were commemorated.
Let me try again. Do
Huge
you agree with the
percentage
president? It's a yes or no. You've asked questions as a judge. You know how to get a yes or no. Do you agree with the president? Yes or no?
A large percentage of the law officers who died this year died from
Do
COVID-19.
you agree with President Biden that police officers who decline to get vaccinated should be fired? Yes or no?
And if they had been vaccinated, they wouldn't have died. And
So is that a yes? You do agree with the
not
president?
one police officer.
In Chicago, a third of the police officers did not file their vaccination status. Do you think Chicago should fire a third of its police officers when murder rates and crime rates are skyrocketing?
This is a determination that the city of Chicago will have to make.
So do you agree with the president? The president said yes. Do you agree with him? You are the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. Do you agree with Joe Biden saying fire police officers despite skyrocketing crime rates?
That is a question that is a one of state law there and will have to be decided by the state.
You have no view on whether we should fire
Senator,
cops?
your time has expired.
Well, you used 2 minutes. on it.
No, I certainly did not. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr.
What do you think? Is the DOJ overstepping, or are these measures necessary for public safety? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.